I never thought I'd find myself sitting in an empty church at 11:30 on a Wednesday night, but there I was, third pew from the back, watching dust particles dance in the dim light, filtering through the stained glass windows. The chaplain, Father Adrian, sat beside me in silence, his presence somehow both comforting and terrifying. I should probably start from the beginning, because the story of how I ended up here isn't simple, and nothing about what happened that night was what I expected. My name is Marcus, and I'd been attending evening services at St. Catherine's for about 3 months. I'm not particularly religious, never have been, but after my breakup with Sienna, I needed somewhere quiet to think. The church was always open for evening prayer on Wednesdays, and it was close to my apartment in the Arts District. Most weeks, there were maybe 6 or 7 people scattered among the pews, all of us there for our own reasons, none of us really talking to each other. It was perfect for someone who wanted to be alone without actually being alone. Father Adrian ran these services. He wasn't what you'd picture when you think of a chaplain. He was maybe 35, with sandy brown hair that always looked slightly disheveled, wire-rimmed glasses that he had a habit of adjusting when he was thinking, and this gentle way of speaking that made you feel like whatever you said mattered. He wore the collar, but somehow he made it look casual, approachable. I'd never actually spoken to him beyond the occasional nod or good evening on my way out. That Wednesday started like any other. I'd had a rough day at the design firm where I work. My boss had torn apart a campaign I'd spent 2 weeks developing, and I was questioning whether I was even good at my job anymore. I was questioning a lot of things, actually. At 28, I felt like I should have my life more figured out than I did. The breakup had shaken me more than I wanted to admit, not because I missed Sienna specifically, but because it had forced me to confront some truths about myself that I'd been avoiding for years. The service was short, maybe 45 minutes. Father Adrian talked about grace and second chances, about how we're often hardest on ourselves when we should be extending the same compassion inward that we offer to others. His words hit differently that night. I found myself really listening instead of just letting the sound wash over me. When he finished, people started filing out as usual. But I stayed in my seat, not quite ready to go back to my empty apartment and the half-eaten takeout in my fridge. I watched the others leave, one by one, until it was just me and Father Adrian. He was at the front of the church, tidying up, putting away the prayer books someone had left scattered on the front pew. I should have left then. I stood up, fully intending to walk out, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way the light fell across the altar, or maybe it was the weight of everything I'd been carrying alone for so long, but instead of walking toward the door, I found myself moving forward, toward him. He looked up as I approached, and there was no surprise in his expression, just this quiet openness. "Marcus, right?" he said, and I was startled that he knew my name. I must have looked confused, because he smiled slightly and added, "You've been coming for a while. I try to remember everyone." "I didn't realize you noticed," I said, and my voice sounded strange in the empty space, too loud and too vulnerable at the same time. "I notice," he said simply. He set down the prayer books and turned to face me fully. "Did you need something? Someone to talk to?" I almost said no. I almost made up some excuse about leaving something behind or asking about the service times. But standing there in that quiet church with this man who seemed genuinely interested in my answer, I found myself saying, "I don't even know where to start." Father Adrian nodded like he understood completely. "Why don't we sit?" he suggested, gesturing to the front pew. "No rush, I've got nowhere to be." So we sat, not in the pew, more actually, but on the steps leading up to the altar, side by side, looking out at the empty church. It felt less formal that way, less like confession, and more like two people just talking. I expected him to prompt me, to ask questions, but he just waited, giving me space to find my words. "I've been lying to myself for a long time," I finally said. The words came out quieter than I intended. "About who I am, about what I want, and I'm tired of it, but I'm also terrified of what it means to stop lying." "What have you been lying about?" His voice was gentle, no judgment in it, just curiosity. I took a breath. This was it. I'd never said it out loud before, not to anyone. "I'm gay," I said, "or I think I am. I've known for years, probably since I was a teenager, but I've been pretending I'm not. Dating women, trying to make it work, like telling myself that what I felt for men was just admiration or friendship or anything other than what it actually was. The silence that followed felt enormous. I couldn't look at him. I kept my eyes fixed on a crack in the floor tile across the aisle, tracing its pattern with my gaze. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Thank you for trusting me with that," Father Adrian said finally. "I know that couldn't have been easy to say." I risked a glance at him. He was looking at me with such kindness that something in my chest cracked open. "Aren't you supposed to tell me it's wrong?" I asked. "Isn't that what the church says?" He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his words were careful, measured. "The church says a lot of things. Different denominations interpret scripture differently, but what I believe, well, what I've come to understand in my years of ministry, is that God's love doesn't come with conditions. You being honest about who you are isn't something to be ashamed of, Marcus. It's brave." "It doesn't feel brave," I said. "It feels like I'm destroying everything I've built. My family, they're traditional, conservative. If I tell them, I'll lose them. And my friends, most of them are from that same world. I've built my whole life around being someone I'm not, and now I don't know how to untangle it all." "You don't have to untangle it all at once," he said. "These things, they happen in steps. The first step is being honest with yourself, which you've done. The rest can come as you're ready." We talked for hours after that. I told him about Sienna, about how I'd cared for her, but could never give her what she deserved. But I told him about the guys I'd noticed over the years, the feelings I'd pushed down and labeled as something else. I told him about the loneliness of living a half-truth, of always monitoring myself, always performing, and he listened to all of it without interruption, without judgment, just present and attentive in a way I'd never experienced before. At some point, I noticed how late it had gotten. The church had grown darker, lit only by a few safety lights near the exits. "I should let you go," I said. "You probably have to be up early." "I'm not in a rush," he said. "This is important. You're important." Something about the way he said it made me look at him more closely. Really look at him. There was something in his eyes, a softness, a kind of understanding that felt personal. "Can I ask you something?" I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "Of course." "How do you know so much about this, about what it feels like?" He was quiet for a long moment, and I thought maybe I'd crossed a line, but then he said, "Because I've been where you are. Not exactly the same circumstances, but close enough." My breath caught. "You're gay, yes," he said, and there was a weight to the admission, like it was something he didn't say often. I came to terms with it years ago during seminary. It was part of why I chose this path, actually. I wanted to create a space where people like us could feel welcome, could feel seen. "But you're a priest," I said, and immediately felt stupid for stating the obvious. "Chaplain," he corrected with a slight smile. "And yes, it's complicated. The church has its rules, its expectations. Much I've made my peace with celibacy, with what that means for my life. But that doesn't change who I am, and it doesn't change my belief that there's nothing wrong with being gay. Nothing sinful about love, Marcus. Nothing shameful about being true to yourself." We sat there in the growing darkness, and I felt something shift between us. It wasn't attraction exactly, or maybe it was, but it was more than that. It was recognition. It was the feeling of being seen, really seen, for the first time in my life. "I don't know how you do it," I said, "how you live with that contradiction." "Everyone lives with contradictions," he said. "We're all trying to reconcile who we are with who we're supposed to be, what we want with what's expected of us. I've found my way of navigating it." "Oh, you'll find yours." "What if I can't?" The question came out smaller than I intended. "What if I'm not as strong as you?" He turned to face me fully then, and in the dim light, his eyes were earnest behind his glasses. "Marcus, you're already stronger than you think. You walked up here tonight. You said the truth out loud. That takes incredible courage." "I'm scared," I admitted. "I'm scared of losing everyone. I'm scared of starting over. I'm scared of being alone." "You won't be alone," he said. "There's a whole community out there, people who will understand, who will support you. And for what it's worth, you have me. If you need someone to talk to, Someone who gets it, I'm here. Something about that offer, the sincerity in it, made my eyes sting. I couldn't remember the last time someone had offered me that kind of unconditional support. "Why are you being so kind to me?" I asked. "Because someone was kind to me once when I needed it most," he said. "A mentor in seminary who saw me struggling and helped me find my way. He told me that our job isn't to judge, it's to love, to create space for people to be themselves. I've tried to live by that ever since." We talked more after that, about lighter things. He told me about his journey to ministry, about growing up in a small town in Oregon, and knowing from an early age that he was different. He told me about the years of trying to pray away his feelings, about the depression that followed, about finally finding a theologian whose work helped him reconcile his faith with his identity. I told him about my work, about my love of design, about the apartment I'd painted 3 different colors in the past year because I couldn't settle on what felt right. "You're searching," he said, "for what fits, what feels true. That's okay, Marcus. That's part of the process." Around midnight, he finally stood up, stretching. "I really should lock up," he said, "but I meant what I said. If you need to talk, my office hours are posted, or you can call the church. They'll forward you to me." I stood too, feeling strangely reluctant to leave. This night had shifted something fundamental in me, and I wasn't ready for it to end. "Thank you," I said, "for listening, for understanding, for being honest with me." "Thank you for trusting me," he said. He extended his hand, and I shook it, feeling the warmth of his grip, the steadiness of it. As I walked toward the exit, I turned back once. He was standing at the altar, looking up at the cross, his expression thoughtful. In that moment, he looked both lonely and at peace, and I understood a little better the choice he'd made, the sacrifice that came with it. The next few weeks were different. I kept coming to the Wednesday services, but now there was an understanding between Father Adrian and me, an unspoken connection. We'd talk afterwards sometimes, not always for hours like that first night, but enough to make me feel less alone. He recommended books, connected me with a support group for LGBTQ Christians, helped me start mapping out what coming out might look like for me. One evening, about a month after that first long conversation, we were sitting in his office, a small room off the main church, filled with books and papers and a coffee maker that had seen better days. I'd been telling him about a conversation I'd had with my sister, testing the waters, trying to gauge how she might react. "You're taking steps," he said. "That's good, that's healthy." "I keep thinking about you," I said, and then immediately felt my face flush. "I mean, about your situation, about how you've made peace with being alone." He smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I'm not sure I'd say I've made peace with it. I've accepted it. There's a difference. Do you ever regret it, choosing this path?" He considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he admitted, "when I see couples, when I think about what I've given up. But then I think about the people I've been able to help, the space I've created here, and I think I made the right choice for me. But Marcus, that doesn't mean it's the right choice for you. You don't have to sacrifice your chance at love to be a good person. What if I told you that sitting here with you, these conversations we have, they're the most alive I've felt in years?" The words came out before I could stop them, bold and vulnerable and true. The air between us changed. He set down his coffee cup carefully, deliberately. "Marcus," he said gently, "I care about you. You know that. But I can't. We can't." "I know," I said quickly. "I know you've made your choice. I'm not asking you to change that. I just needed you to know that you've changed my life, that knowing you, talking to you, it's helped me see what's possible." He was quiet for a long moment. "You've changed my life too," he said finally. "By more than you know, these past weeks, our conversations, they've reminded me why I chose this path, why it matters. So thank you for that." I left his office that night knowing it was the last time we'd talk like that, just the two of us. Not because either of us wanted it to end, but because we both understood the line we were approaching, the danger of what might happen if we kept meeting like this. It hurt, but it also felt right, respectful of his choices and his commitments. I still go to the Wednesday services. Father Adrian still gives his talks about grace and compassion and finding your way. Sometimes our eyes meet across the church, and there's recognition there, warmth, a shared understanding. He's become my friend, my mentor, the person who helped me find the courage to start living honestly. Was 3 months after that night in his office, I came out to my parents. It went about as badly as I'd feared, but I survived it. I found new communities, made new friends, started dating for the first time as my authentic self. Through it all, Father Adrian was there, not as anything more than what he could be, but as a steady presence, a reminder that faith and identity don't have to be at war with each other. I think about that first night sometimes, sitting on those altar steps, saying the truth out loud for the first time. How terrified I was, how certain I was that speaking those words would destroy everything. Father Adrian taught me that honesty doesn't destroy, it rebuilds. It clears away what's false, so something real can grow in its place. He also taught me about sacrifice, or about choosing a path and walking it with integrity even when it's hard. I don't think I could make the choice he's made, to live alone, to set aside that part of himself. But I respect it. I honor it. And I'm grateful that his choice led him to be there that night when I needed someone who understood, someone who could show me that being gay and being good aren't contradictory, that I could be both true and whole. We don't sit in empty churches anymore, just the two of us. But his impact on my life remains. He was the chaplain who stayed after the service, who sat with a stranger in crisis and offered not judgment, but compassion, not answers, but presence. In doing so, he gave me permission to be myself, to step into my truth, to believe that I deserved love and acceptance and a full life. Sometimes the people who change us most are the ones we can't have, the ones who show us what's possible and then step back to let us find it on our own. Father Adrian was that person for me. Our story doesn't have the ending some people might want. No forbidden romance, no dramatic departure from faith. Instead, it has something better, something truer. It has friendship, mentorship, mutual respect, and the kind of impact that lasts a lifetime. That night in the empty church, I found my voice. And that's a gift I'll carry with me always.